You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 22nd of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Carlotta Rebello. Coming up on today's programme.
I set out in July the terms upon which we would act to recognise Palestinian statehood. That moment has now arrived.
As the UK, Canada, Australia and Portugal all recognise a Palestinian state, Monocle's Asia editor James Chambers explains why most Southeast Asian countries made the move long before their European counterparts did. Then, Monocle's Fernando Augusto Pacheco is here for a look at what's making the news in Brazil. What do you have for us today, Fer?
Hello, Carlotta. Today we discuss the protest in Brazil against the Congress proposal to give amnesty to Jair Bolsonaro and the death of the Brazilian being.
More from Fernando a bit later. Plus, we'll be catching up with Ukrainian fashion designer Ksenia Schneider at London Fashion Week. All that ahead right here on The Briefing with me, Carlotta Rebello. So welcome to today's episode of The Briefing. With UK now having formally recognised a Palestinian state, it's worth noting that most of Southeast Asia did so long ago. Thailand recognised Palestine in 2012, while many others made the move in the 1980s and 1990s. The only regional holdouts are Singapore and Myanmar, and US allies Japan and South Korea that remain aligned with Israel. Well, joining me to discuss this further is James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor. Hello, James, joining us from Bangkok today. Let's start precisely with this. Why have so many Southeast Asian nations been quicker to recognise Palestine than its Western counterparts?
Well, we've been talking on this show and other shows over the years about things like the Ukraine-Russia crisis and the Gaza crisis. And it is part of the world. It's the Gaza one that resonates a lot more with people over here. And that's largely because in Southeast Asia, there is a huge Muslim population. In countries like Indonesia, which is the world's biggest Muslim majority country, and Malaysia, they are big advocates for Palestine, and it's a huge issue for them. And they were among the countries, the first countries that recognized the idea of a Palestinian state back in 1988 when it was first introduced, and a raft of countries around the world did at the same time. And so, here in Southeast Asia, there are only, as you mentioned, a couple of countries that don't recognize the state of Palestine, that being Singapore and Myanmar. So it's been led by the large Muslim population in Southeast Asia, and from the 80s to now, the issue of Palestine is a huge talking point in this part of the world.
It's interesting to hear you mention their religion, because it makes me think about, the weight that public opinion can have in these debates. Across Europe, we've seen protests ever since the conflict began, demanding government action. And I'm curious, how much does public opinion and religion shape these decisions in the region?
Well, it's, as I said, it's been a major issue for countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, which have, been leading from the front in terms of, advocating for Palestine and calling out, the Israeli kind of genocide way before even the UN. I recall our own event, which took place in Jakarta in April. The chiefs, one of our speakers took to the stage and called out the genocide in Gaza. So it's something that's talked about widely in this part of the world, and it's something like issues like the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim. He's been very vocal about this issue, and Palestine and Gaza has been something he's been working on as a project and advocating for since he was young. So it's something that the voters in those countries care very, very dearly about. And I don't know whether it's because of the distance or not, but they just seem to be able to talk more freely about it than even some of the, Palestine's neighbors in the Gulf.
You mentioned there the holdout, Singapore and Myanmar. And at least last year, Singapore said that, in principle, they'd be prepared to recognize a Palestinian state at an appropriate time. Of course, now all eyes are set on the United Nations General Assembly and the country's making similar moves. What do you think would need to happen for Singapore's position to change?
I guess it's been an interesting few days, right? We've all been looking at these maps of places around the world that have yet to recognize Palestine. And I guess, the UK, France, Australia, Canada, it's been top of the news there. But, the way it's been presented, you'd think that actually they were early movers. But when you look at the map, they're obviously pretty late to the game. And there are not many countries left that don't recognize it. So in the Singaporean parliament today, knowing that they are one of the few left who haven't recognized Palestine, it's been a huge talking point. And we've had long speeches from the foreign minister and from the minister for Muslim affairs. And they've kind of reaffirmed Singapore's long-standing position that they are in favor of the two-state solution. But they also have slightly strengthened that stance, and they said that the time when they will recognize a Palestinian state is now when and not if. But they're kind of what they're waiting for is for Palestine to have an effective government, and an effective government that not only renounces terrorism, but also recognizes the right of a state of Israel to exist. So they're saying that's, when that happens, they will recognize the state of Palestine. If that could ever happen, it is up for debate. But I think, in Singapore, they certainly know that, the clock is ticking, and they need to come out with a very strong statement. But when, it's Israel's a very interesting country when it comes to its relations with Israel and why it hasn't yet recognized Palestine. The founder of Israel, the founder of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, in the past, in the 60s and 70s, compared Singapore to be like the Israel of Southeast Asia, because it is a tiny state, a tiny, non-Muslim majority state surrounded by these big Muslim majority countries like Indonesia and Malaysia. And even though we forget it now, there was a time where Singapore was, kind of worried about its own future and whether it could stay independent. And so in the early days, it relied a lot on Israel to train its military and to buy arms from them. And, there was a very, very close relationship between those two countries. So Singapore will feel like they owe Israel a lot. And that's probably a big reason why they haven't been overly quick to recognize Palestine.
James, the story I'm sure will be checking back in with you when becomes more evident. James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor in Bangkok, thank you for joining us. Now, here's Anita Riota with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Carlotta. Hong Kong-based airline Cathay Pacific is set to cancel more than 500 flights. This as super typhoon Ragasa is forecast to hit the financial hub. Ragasa is crossing the Luzon Strait between southern Taiwan and the Philippines. 10,000 people have been evacuated to schools and emergency shelters in the northern Philippines. Outgoing Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's ruling party has opened official campaigning to find his replacement. 5 candidates are vying for the Liberal Democrat Party's top job ahead of a highly unpredictable vote due in early October. The first ever sing-along screening of Netflix's K-pop Demon Hunters has taken place in the South Korean city of Busan. The event was part of the 30th Busan International Film Festival. A 700-seat venue sold out almost immediately. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Carlotta.
Thanks, Anita. Now let's turn to Brazil for a look at what's been making the papers today. And of course, I'm delighted to say that Monocle senior correspondent Fernando Augusto Pacheco is here with me in the studio. Bom dia, Fernando.
Bom dia. Lusophone briefing. I love it.
I love it. And what I don't love, though, it's one of the stories making the headlines in Brazil. And this is about the protests that have been happening. Tell us all about this.
So this is a very interesting story, Carlotta, topping all the headlines in the newspapers in Brazil. So basically, there's been protests yesterday in Brazil in all the 27 state capitals. And basically, it was quite interesting because it was a protest led by the left, saying that they don't want amnesty to Jair Bolsonaro and the 8th of January criminals, of course, who invaded Brasilia. and also against a proposed law in Congress. And this is quite ridiculous. I don't even understand how the Congress could do that. Basically, it would be a law that would make it harder for lawmakers to be charged for alleged crimes. So they were trying to defend themselves against crime. I mean, this is shocking.
So the alleged crimes, that's quite shocking because it's almost preempting the future criminal activity.
Absolutely, and especially at a time that Brazil is very concerned about organized crime and the involvement of certain MPs. We've been having quite a few scandals most recently. And, I said it's interesting that the left led this because in the last decade, let's be fair, the right is the one, they are the ones on the streets, the pro-Bolsonaro supporters. They've been very strong, wearing their Brazil Football Club shirts. And the left was almost a little bit forgotten, I have to say, in the last decade when it comes to protests. But this have changed that.
Staying on that, I'm curious, were these protests, led by the left, marked by them also wearing the Brazilian national kit? Because we kind of are seeing that also here in the UK, where the nation's flag, the Union Jack, has been used by the right, and in the same in Brazil. So I wonder if the reclaiming of it by the left is almost like a reclaiming from all sides of the political spectrum.
Good question, and the reclaiming is working. So there were a lot of people wearing actually the Brazil shirt. And you're very right, Carlotta. For a few years, even I was a little bit embarrassed, thinking that perhaps the Brazil shirt would be associated with far-right activities. But in Brazil, we're in a moment of transition. We are reclaiming it. Perhaps we're not quite there yet, 100%, but it's a good process at the moment.
Now, next we have some tragic news. I couldn't believe my eyes. And this is the death of the Brazilian bean.
It is tragic because when people ask, Fernando, what is Brazilian food? It's very difficult to say, but we have a staple. It's rice and beans. Every single Brazilian eats rice and beans every day.
And it's delicious.
It is delicious. And then I wonder, is that the case still? There was a story on Folha de São Paulo. So today, apparently, Brazilians consume 12.8 kilos of Brazilian beans a year. But, Carlotta, in 1967 was 26.57. So it's less than half of that number. And there's several reasons for that. For the poorest in society, the price of beans is more expensive. So I think it rose even more than other staples like rice and chicken. And the middle classes and the rich, first of all, they think it's time consuming because it does take time, to cook the beans, the pressure cooker, this kind of stuff. And they're eating outside more often as well. But I think it's so sad. And of course, with farofa on top, which is our little manioc kind of flour.
I absolutely love farofa. You're describing there as an amazing dish.
We're busy. We're becoming busy. I hope pret-a-mangers are next.
But has the bean been replaced?
Well, replaced by ultra-processed staples, which I think is horrible. And people are worried, of course, about their diets. But even there was a nutritionist quoted in this article saying that actually rice and beans are amazing for your health. And even when Brazilians used to eat them more often, we had less obesity rates as well. So guys, let's think about it. Let's bring back the bean.
So reclaim the flag, reclaim the beans.
Yes.
One last story from you. And this is, of course, the iconic Vale Tudo telenovela. And this is, the remake of this icon from the 1980s in Portugal was so popular. So I can't even imagine what this remake is making for audiences back home in Brazil.
Vale Tudo, yes, you're right. From 1988 was an icon. Was talking about corruption in the country. It was a very important telenovela. So the current remake is going on at the moment, is in its last month. But Folha de São Paulo did a very in-depth story on that. Not only Folha, but O Globo as well. Everyone is doing stories like this. And of course, the main character is Odete Reutemann. She is the CEO of an airline company, but she's evil, okay? And she dies in the original series. And most Brazilians at the time, there was a polling, 40% of them wanted her to die indeed. But they did the same question, now only 4% would. And Carlotta, this is a very interesting one for you. I think you'll be interested in that because she's a free woman sexually. She is evil. She does kill people time to time, I'm not saying, but a lot of women are relating to her. They wanted to see a powerful woman there. She's the CEO of this airline company. So even though she can be a little bit of a fascist and killer sometimes, but she's a free woman. So I think Brazilians are, there's both sides.
So this is almost showing how,
she's humanized
from
in a way.
when it first aired in the 80s, how much society has changed in a way. She is more relatable.
More relatable, because before she was like, oh, this evil, cold character, that nobody kind of liked her a single bit. Now it's different. She's, she does have her evil touches, but she's also a human being, a powerful woman.
Fernando, I know you love your telenovela divas. You love your villains too. Where do you stand on Odette Reutemann?
You know what? I am so sad that if she's going to die indeed, which I think she will, because if she doesn't, that's a big part of the story. I'll be so sad, because Deborah Bloch is doing an incredible job. Without her, I can't imagine the soap opera. I think I might even cry.
Oh my God. Next week we need to hear what happens in the series finale. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you for joining us here on The Briefing. You're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Xenia Schneider is a Ukrainian denim and women's wear brand. Founded in 2011 by the label's namesake and her husband, Anton, Xenia Schneider was one of the first brands to embrace reclaimed denim in its main design ethos and has since upcycled the equivalent of 600 jeans per month. In spite of the conflict, the majority of their pieces are still produced at the label's atelier in Kyiv. Ahead of the London's Fashion Week debut, which took place this morning, Monocle's Lily Austin sat down with Xenia and she began by asking why it was so important to keep the atelier running from Ukraine throughout the war.
When the war started, I felt I can lose everything. And I felt that I need to fight back, that I will not give up. I will not just, give up what I was building for so many years. And I had this responsibility for my team. So it was really challenging to keep it working in terms of safety, in terms of, blackouts. It was really tough. In terms of business, business-wise, I think it would be much easier to relocate production into Turkey or Portugal or China, I don't know. But for me, as a Ukrainian girl, it was just, I couldn't move anywhere. I thought we need to keep this made in Ukraine as long as it's possible.
And how does Ukraine influence your designs?
Ukraine is very eclectic and always been mix of everything. And I think the idea of upcycling was with me since maybe 13, 12 years, because in Ukraine, there were no fashion stores or concept stores when I was growing up at all, but there were lots of second-hands and vintage stores. Not stores, I would say, markets, really huge open-air markets with tons of used clothes. And this is the places where we were shopping with my friends. So it was part of my identity to have these clothes and remake them, redesign them. And I think that I was doing this since my teenagers, for myself, for my friends. And when I became a designer, it was organic way for me to use this as a raw material.
As we're talking about it, it's making me think about how reworking materials as you do, you're kind of adding a story to another piece that's already had a life.
Yes.
Is that part of the inspiration to your work?
Yes. For me, it's really exciting to take something from the rubbish and make it available, make it so beautiful that you can sell it in a concept store like Selfridges. It's a challenge, and I get really excited, to be able as a designer to improve my skills and my work, to be able to sell it to customers who are used to buy luxury goods and to pursue them to invest into secondhand or, just rubbish things, but redesigned by myself. So for me, it's something that inspires me every day.
And I wanted to talk to you about London Fashion Week, because I know you're having your debut show
Yes.
at this one. Why now? What made you want to do this?
Honestly, I moved from Ukraine when the war started, so it's my third year here in the UK, and I always go back to Ukraine because I have my team and production there. So I'm not like fully in the UK, and I'm not in Ukraine, so I'm like somewhere in between, and it was really difficult time mentally for me to settle here and to still stay with my team in Ukraine. So I was somewhere in between, and now I finally realized that I need to also be present here. I can't just, live here but not being visible that I'm here. So I'm really proud of myself that I'm making this step, and we will show our collection at London Fashion Week. Honestly, I was applying for a presentation because I was I'm not ready to do a catwalk show, but I received approval for a catwalk show, and I said, okay, let's do catwalk, because previously we were showing at Ukrainian Fashion Week every season, so we were a runway designer, but in Ukraine. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to show in London.
The fashion designer Xenia Schneider in conversation with Monocle's Lily Austin. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Hassan Anderson. Our researcher was Daniela Bros-Smith, and our studio manager was Mariella Bevan. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Carlotta Rebello. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.